Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Nedarim. We are up to Perek Zayin Mishnah Gimel. Today's Mishnah should be Leilu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov ben Chana bat Miriam, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Lehavdil ben Chaim lechaim v'lerefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betor Shach ule Israel. This Mishnah discusses Nedarim about clothing. Hanodar min aksud mutar basak ba'iriya u ba'chamila. Someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself from clothing is permitted to wear sackcloth, yiriya and chamila. Sackcloth refers to material made from goat's hair. Yiriya and chamila were thick, coarse materials that were used only as protection against rain. This is not enough for them to be considered clothing, and so they are not included in the neder. Now these materials were not called clothing because being very heavy and coarse, they were not normally worn. Amar konam tzemer ole Alayev. If someone said wool that goes up on me is konam to me, meaning he prohibited himself to wear wool. Mutar litkasot b'gizei tzemer. He is permitted to cover himself with shearings of wool, since he did not simply say wool, but added that goes up on me, which was how people referred to putting on clothing. He prohibited only woolen clothing and not wool itself. Pishtan ole alai. Similarly, if he said flax that goes up on me is konam to me. Mutar litkasot b'anitze Pishtan. He is permitted to cover himself with stalks of flax because he prohibited only clothing made from flax, meaning linen, and not raw flax. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hakol lefi hanoder, everything depends on the situation of the person making the neder, meaning the neder is interpreted according to his personal circumstances at the time of the neder. Tan v'izia v'yerecho kasher. For example, he was carrying a load of wool or linen and was perspiring from the weight of the load, and as a result, his body odor was strong and disturbing to him. Amar konam tzemer upishtim olim alai, and he said, wool and flax that go up on me are konam to me. Mutar litkasot, he is permitted to wear clothing made of these materials. The word litkasot does not mean the same thing that we said earlier. Previously meant to cover oneself. Here it means to wear, as the Tfel Yisrael points out. But he is forbidden to throw them behind himself, meaning to carry them on his back. In order to carry such bundles, a person would usually sling them over his shoulder and onto his back. It's merely an example which the Mishnah mentions because it was the most common way of carrying, but in fact all methods of carrying are forbidden. Since he made the neder in reaction to the unpleasantness of carrying the wool and flax, we assume that he meant to prohibit only carrying them and not wearing clothing made from these materials. Now, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the first Tana that where the meaning of the neder is not clear from the person's situation, we assume he intends to forbid only wearing the material he mentioned, not covering himself with it or carrying bundles of it. Rabbi Yehuda is speaking of a different case. If it's clear from the context that he refers to carrying, only carrying is forbidden and not wearing. And that is the end of Mishnah Gimel. The Rav does point out the Rav does point out, Valachak Rabbi Yehuda, the Halakha does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. We continue now with Mishnah Daled, which discusses the Nedarim about houses. Hanodar min habayit mutar ba'aliyah. Someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself from entering a bayit, literally house, is permitted to enter the upper story. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Meir, people use the word bayit only in reference to the ground floor. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say aliyah bichlal habayit, the upper story is included in the word bayit. Therefore, he is prohibited from entering both stories. Hanodar min aliyah mutar b'bayit. However, all agree that someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself from entering the upper story is permitted to enter the bayit, the ground floor, because the term upper story is never used for the ground floor. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.